Hello and welcome to Robotics Surgery Insights. I'm excited to be joined today by John Hoskins, CCO and CTO of Atalys. Thanks for joining me today, John.
It's a pleasure to be here, Joseph. Thank you for having me.
And could you please start by providing a background to Atalys and its role in the surgical robotics and minimally invasive surgery space?
Atalys has had about a 50-year history here in the plastics and medical device industry throughout our recent acquisitions. We're really a precision-driven, highly engineered manufacturer, contract manufacturer of robotic-assisted surgery, minimally invasive surgery components, and what we're delivering across the broad spectrum of surgical is mission-critical, highly engineered, highly complex geometry products to the medical device industry. One of the things that really set us apart, and I think probably the best way to define us in a very small sentence, and I'm going to go back to someone who has been kind of pivotal in the Atalys story, is a man by the name of Leonard Schnipke. And he said, the impossible we do right away, miracles take a bit longer. And I think that frames up who we are and what we do and why we do what we do. So our basic background is that we've started as a precision tooling and engineering house. And then with that, there's three kind of legs of the stool here: the precision tooling and engineering, the advanced plastics processing, and the high-speed automation and fully scalable automation from end to end.
Excellent. Lots of experience in the space for sure. What would you say are some of the main challenges you see OEMs face when developing and manufacturing components for surgical robots or minimally invasive surgery devices?
If you look at MIS and RAS specifically, and they're incredibly interrelated, I think there's a couple things that you look at the challenges. It's precision at scale. I think the speed to market right now, coming up with advanced therapies, getting them there quickly. There's the huge, COVID brought up supply chain resiliency throughout the globe and how that affected us. And then cost management. So the first one, I'd stop here and go right back to precision at scale. And what does that mean? And as we find the therapies today are becoming more and more focused, and they're getting into areas of the body they never have before because of micro and nanotechnologies, right? We're delivering therapies exactly where they need to be. That is really based around an incredible amount of precision and critical componentry and critical functions inside those devices. So when we do that, it's one thing to make one of them. It's another thing to make a device that has 1,900 critical dimensions and make 1 million of them, 10 million of them, 100 million of them, and then assemble them with all those incredible componentry together, and then do it well, right? And do it repeatably, sustainably, and most importantly, with zero defects. So that's what we mean when we talk about precision at scale. The other one, and that I would tip on, and I think is very important, is the supply chain resiliency. And you look at how many people were caught, for lack of a better term, with their pants down, right, throughout COVID, where people were relying on these nations, or they were relying on certain companies who had no redundancy in their supply chain. And all of a sudden now we have surgeries that are on hold. We're dealing with shortages for critical surgeries and ambulatory surgeries and everything that's required. Even most recently, IV fluid bags, right, where you have one major producer of them, and due to Hurricane Helene, all of a sudden, that whole supply has been compromised throughout the world. So companies, one of our challenges is to make sure, how can we do this in multiple facilities and have that geographic, I won't say disparity, but that might be the right term, so that something here isn't necessarily going on there, right? So that we can supply the market even under the most difficult, difficult of times and consternation. The third piece, and the one I'd like to, I think is a huge focus of the medical device industry today is cost efficiency. And I bring this back to the changing model of healthcare that we're seeing here in the United States and around the globe. The reimbursement models are changing, but really what's driving that? And that's demographics, and that we're now going to a time where in history where the greatest portion of our population is aging. and they're going to use more healthcare than ever before. And here in a lot of the developed nations and in the United States, which I can speak most intelligently about, is they're going from a private healthcare model to a government, Medicare healthcare funded model. And with that, the reimbursement is much less. So now we still have to develop more. We have to bring more devices to the market. They have to perform better than they ever have before because there's a greater need. Oh, and by the way, there's a new cost pressure that didn't exist, right? So everything we do as Atalys, you have to think about how are we going to do this better, faster, zero defect, and more cost effectively than we ever have before. And those are real challenges, not just for us, but for everyone servicing this market.
Interesting. Could you talk a little bit more about the core capabilities of Atalys and how they align with the needs of sort of surgical robotics and medical device manufacturers in general?
It comes down to three things, which I mentioned when we first started talking, right? It's precision tooling and engineering as one of our pillars. The other is advanced plastics processing. And then the other, ultimately, to bring all those together is assembly. And assembly going from either assembling one part to assembling 300 million parts. So let's kind of go back and see how these all interrelate. Tooling is simply, right, in plastics, you're making a tool which produces a part to print. The advanced processing is the taking of that tool and then producing something with it, right? A part that comes out of it. And then ultimately assembly is when you come out of that and you're creating either a sub-assembly or full assemblies of what the other two just created. So I think what makes us different and what really sets us apart is how we approach those three different, very unique sciences that are, for a lack of a better term, mutually exclusive. They all have to work together to create magic, right? And they all have to be interrelated, intertwined, where you're taking all the needs of automation and you're thinking about that when you produce a tool and parts, right? And all the features you put in and how you do it. So when we approach tooling, we have a very different approach in what we do. We're highly scientifically based in what we do. We go back to first principles where people are looking at a print, they build a thing and it's metal and what have you. We go back to the very essence of what the issue is. And what is a tool used for? In its absolute essence, it's used to transfer heat from one substance to another to make a part. So we go back and use things like first principles, and we have highly proprietary and models of how we do heat flow and things of that nature in our tooling, right? How we map out a tool, how we understand how heat needs to be transferred. And we have all these different calculators that we've invented ourselves to do that. The second thing is, okay, how do we, when we're processing these incredibly critical parts, we're not just processing one part, right? How do we process more of them more efficiently and then hit all those critical dimensions? So the tie-in between our first two parts is absolutely critical. You're going to see most of the world, they build a tool and then they mold the part that the tool produces, right? To part to print, as they call it. And the tool determines how fast they can go and what they can do. Where we're different is we develop the most robust scientific molding processes right off the bat, using equipment that a lot of others won't use, designing our own equipment, and configuring things differently. And then what we do is we come up with what we would consider, we do we kind of have a plan or a program that we say, okay, this is how we're going to process this. And instead of letting the tool determine the process, we let the process determine the tool. So we always say is like, we tool to a process, not process to a tool. And that's a very dynamic shift. So our tools are built to match the most robust, high-speed processes that you can develop. And they're all founded in science and technology and how we do that. And then once we've produced those parts, we can either take a one part process flow and give you, through, let's say we're doing lower numbers, we have an offshore low-cost country option where we can do it all manually to produce your assemblies or sub-assemblies, or we can go into the most advanced, fully automated inspection assembly systems in the world. And we have with our capabilities in-house, and I think we'll probably get to that, is we're at our 10th generation of some of our products now in assemblies that we've developed and pioneered. Another thing, I think we look at ourselves a little differently. We're not just a contract manufacturer. We're a true partner of the OEM, and we're aligned in their goals. and we're here to serve patients. So we see ourselves as really an extension of the OEMs we serve. And in that, we're not someone who makes parts. We develop technology, IP. We actually have our own patents as well around some of the devices we've been, foundational in developing for the industry.
You teased it, so I will ask. Could you talk a little bit more about some of the advanced technologies that you do use to improve manufacturing efficiency and precision?
One of the things that we do is we go back to first principles, right? If you look at, most people use design software and assume it's right. It's like using a calculator. We can actually put those theories and formulas on blackboards, and we take it back to whiteboard level. We have a highly trained staff. We have a doctorate of thermodynamics who leads and works and leads our R&D group. And there's things that we do that are very different. So what we're doing, we go back to basics and then applying true science to it, and then engineer through it, and then use all this new technology. That's how we get to designing the very best tools. And we come up with a lot of novel concepts. We push the bounds. We whiteboard things. People say, hey, it can't be done. And we're like, well, that's, just let us try to figure it out. And that's led to us coming up with a lot of revolutionary designs for our partners, and really pushing speed and accuracy and of course, zero defect quality forward. The other piece is, again, which leads right into it, is in our processing. Again, how we challenge our DOEs, how we go through validating products is very different. We use applied sciences throughout all of that, and using the very latest technology. And then some of it is, again, designing some of our own. And then probably the most important one, and I think that separates us from many in the surgical space, and especially in stapling, where we have been a pioneer in that. Literally, we've been there since the very birth of the industry. We're at our 10th generation of automation. And we have produced surgical staple cartridges probably more than anyone else on earth over our near 40 years producing these. And we've gone through 10 generations of automation and several hundred millions of parts through these. And we've learned every time. Every generation has helped us springboard into the next generation. How can we do it faster? How can we inspect more quality into the process? How can we find better ways to assemble these more efficiently in smaller footprints, right? And again, it all comes down to one thing. How can we deliver the very best product for patients, right? How can we improve patient outcomes? How can we help reduce the cost of healthcare globally?
You mentioned earlier that one of the big challenges in the surgical robotics space is supply chain, managing the supply chain. How does Atalys help its clients to address supply chain resiliency?
We're the only producer of staple cartridges in the world that can actually produce the tooling, process, and fully assemble in 2 separate locations. We can build tools simultaneously in 2 locations. Most people have one source or have to go to a special source to do it. We can do everything from end to end in 2 sites, which are geographic. One is in the Northeast, the other is in the Midwest of the United States. The other thing that we've done is having our offshore, our low-cost country option in Dominican Republic. So we've given ourselves some cushion away from the American, the North American continent. But at the same time, what we've allowed ourselves to do, and throughout our other sites, is have redundancy in every market we serve. So obviously, very extreme precision surgical staple cartridges and that nature, we have 2 sites. But in surgical access, we have 2 sites. In surgical instruments, we have 2 sites. And we've done that. That's been a very strategic approach of ours, was to make sure that we offer that supply chain resiliency, that redundancy in our operations. And we think about that even when we're launching products and we're working with our OEM partners and saying, hey, we want to validate in 2 sites. We want to make sure that we can cross-qualify. We want to make sure that if there's any opportunity for risk in your supply chain, we're doing everything that Atalys can do to stop that or to mitigate that risk from day one.
Could you talk a little bit more about the types of components and assemblies you've manufactured for surgical robots?
So we're heavily in surgical. In surgical, there's a lot of areas we call access, which is trocars and cannulas, which allow you access in and out of the body, right? We do a lot of what we call instruments and end effector components, right? That are all part of the food chain or the product family that get you from start to finish on a device. So everything, and then of course, we put these into assemblies. Sometimes they're single parts that are going to our OEM partners. Sometimes we're building sub-assemblies together that go into larger devices, or in some instances, we're actually doing the entire assembly, right? Like a fully loaded staple cartridge. So we have a long history in access, trocars, cannulas, and entire access devices. We've been in it for decades, and we have actually proprietary technology around that we've developed in our tooling. So we have some special bimetallic cooling that we do where we can produce cannulas faster, thinner walls, stronger and longer, and more and straighter than anyone else, where we've developed that technology in-house. And again, that comes from our background in thermodynamics and science that we've been able to do that. The instrument side of it, everything from ligation clips through energy devices, all the way through the channels that run all the way back, right? That actually make the device, make the distal end work with the proximal, and then all the proximal end devices and parts, which are the handles, right? So you have the soft grip handles, and whether they're manual or whether they're now powered handles, that's part of our entire product line that we deal with there. And then the one that we're probably most famous or best known for, and really have been the foundation of our organization, has been surgical staple cartridges. And we are unique in that we were at the birth of that industry. We were part of that. We were pioneers in that. Before the OEMs that we're referring to were the names that they are today and the companies that they are today, we were pulling the very first plastic surgical staple cartridges off tools. And we were doing that some over 40 years ago. And we have been, since that day, have pioneered. We've produced probably more than anyone else at this point, and have produced more in different configurations, from the very smallest one on the earth to the very largest one on the earth, and every configuration in between. We've pioneered the design of those. We have patents even around those. But more importantly, working with our OEM partners, we have brought more sizes, more different ones for different types of therapies to market, the most difficult ones that are straight, ones that are curved, ones that are smaller than anyone else and have different configuration of the pockets. And these are, and then at the same time, we found ways of going, well, initially you make them in different parts. We are now on generation number 10 of assembling them. And we're going to assemble them faster and more efficiently than any other group on the face of the earth. We're at a technology kind of a break point for us where we're just about to platform. I can tell you we're about to release something called Gotham, which is a project of ours that we've internally. And then you'll hear another one, which you'll love here being from the UK, one called Liverpool. And Liverpool is all about the code name for literally the Everest for us. The next generation, what the 10th generation is going to do to us is going to drive us to Liverpool. I can't say what that is right now, but what I can say is there is no one else on the face of the earth that can with this next jump in technology. And so that's something that, how can we benefit the MIS and the RIS is all these devices we produce, whether like I said, it's all the instruments, whether it's the surgical access to go in, or whether it's the cartridges themselves, all these things are critical componentry to RIS and MIS, which are, really what changes is the driver of it, right? RIS, we're taking a whole assembly that's being driven by a robot, where with MIS, in most instances, it's a surgeon with a powered or manual handle doing the same thing, but obviously the surgeon is doing all that work. And so we're part of everything we make is really falls into, or at least in our surgical side of our business, falls into that continuum. And for us, our goal with zero defects, our goal with pushing the bounds of technology and the precision and giving them the confidence they need to do these new surgeries, and where we've taken sizes, right? Getting them smaller and helping them get to a point where they can go after these new clinical states and develop these new therapies. That's how we participate in the industry, and we're very proud to be part of that.
So you've been pioneers up to this point, and based on what you're saying, your plans are to sort of continue to be a partner and a pioneer for the surgical robotics industry.
The future is heading towards, as we all know, right? It's heading towards, open surgery, which is still by far the most used surgery in the globe, and then you have MIS, which is, I pardon me if I'm off base, I think it's somewhere around 10% of the surgeries in the world today are MIS. And then you have robotic surgery, which is a fraction of that. MIS and RAS are very related, right? Because they're both achieving the same thing, but they're doing it via a different drive mechanism, right? We're using AI and we're using robotic technology is the next step in the continuum of MIS. MIS is it's simple. It's minimally invasive surgery, right? You're going through a very small port to get into the cavity and to go and pinpoint the area you need to either excise, remove, whatever the therapy is that's required, but you're directing it to a point, and you're doing as least amount of collateral damage with the smallest devices you can possibly manufacture, going through the smallest access point in the body, right? So you're going to have higher efficacy and then shorter recovery times, which is obviously incredible for patient outcomes. Robotic surgery takes that to a new level, and that whereas surgeons and the brilliant people who use these devices and save people's lives every day, they're human. They're just like you and I. They can't do this 12 hours straight. You want a surgeon that's on their game, right? And after 6 hours of extremely tenuous surgery, not only is it mentally, but it's physically wearing on these people. They can't do that. They can't do one after another. And where a robot can do that. And with the technology that's coming about today that we've seen, and if you look at the world's leaders in robotics, they're with CT technology and how they're going in, these robotics are learning, they're getting better, right? And they're improving, and they take out the human, I won't say they take out the human element of it, but they take out the things about us being human, right? The areas like the stressors of a human, where our hands do move. And our movements aren't perfect all the time, where a robot can get around that. One of the things I liken to it, and pardon the digression, but you have a 5th generation fighter the U.S. Air Force makes called the F-22 Raptor. They don't have to produce any more of those because there's nobody else in the world that can make one that can outdo this plane. Most importantly, though, what makes it unique is the technology that makes it fly and controls the flight surfaces can't be controlled by normal means to a human being, like how we have traditionally run aircraft over the years, because the flight surfaces need so much control and have to have so many adjustments, micro adjustments all the time to make this plane work properly, right? To perform at its highest level, so it has to translate. You actually have robotics there, AI and digital technology that's translating the humans' movements into what makes the plane actually fly. Robotic surgery is very much like that. It's taking those human movements and it's making them so precise. It's making them better so that we can do things that are incredible. We can do things longer, more accurately, without fail, and we're learning every time, right? So the robotic surgery is really the next step in that. I think the two of them together, MIS and RAS, are inextricably linked forever. And I think they're part of the march even to what I would call non-invasive surgery. And that's a huge thing, to get to the point where we're someday not going into the human body, but how we access the human body is going to change, and access will change. And ultimately, I think for the next decade or two, what we're going to see is the size, right? That you're going to go from extremely small critical parts that have micro features, that you're going to see micro parts with nano features, right? And that's going to be the march to where we're going. And I think you're going to see robotics give us, help us propel and accelerate, these therapies.
And the surgical robotics space has lots and lots of startups entering the market. At what point should they get in touch with Atalys?
Sooner in the process is always better. And again, that kind of resonates with us in a lot of ways, because we're a partner to those we serve, right? To the world's leading OEMs in surgical and in other spaces, in fluid IV and in biopharma. We see ourselves right from the very beginning. We're a partner. We're aligned in our goals. We're aligned in our understanding, and we're aligned in our mission. And our mission is patience and improving patient outcomes, right? Making surgery more available and cost-effective throughout the globe. We're doing what they're doing, right? We don't see ourselves as serving. We're working together as part of a team. And I think any of the first generation people that are coming out there, We want to work with you. We want to be on your team. That's how we look at it. We look at it as partners, and we want to be your partner throughout that journey, because lest we forget, we're all serving the exact same person or people, which is patients. That's who we're here for. We're not making parts for the sake of making parts. We're making medical devices that save lives. And I don't know if could be an even more noble pursuit than that.
That's a really nice summary. Do you have any final comments before we conclude?
Again, I go back to our why. Why do we do what we do? And it's not about parts, and it's not about machines, and it's not about automation. It's about us applying science. It's about us forwarding, the technology. It's about us being innovative. And there's one reason we do that. It begins with us, with people coming up with us, and it ends with people. Right? People say, well, 1 in a million is good enough, right? With the failure rates or something like that. Atalys, 1 in a million is not acceptable. We will keep pushing the bounds of technology, science, engineering until we live in a 100% zero defect world. That is where we're pushing it to. And again, for us, it starts with people, it ends with people. The patient is who we are working for. And if I could leave you with this thought, the best and worst day of anybody's life, all of us, is when there's a loved one or yourself on that table, and there's for whatever reason that person finds them there. We as an industry, but we as Atalys get to play a part in literally the most important thing to a family and to a person, and to help save their life on a day, right? Like there is no greater thing for us. There is no greater why for us as to why we do what we do. It's about patients. It's about saving lives. It's that there is nothing that we won't stop at to reach that end. And for me, it's a journey where I've had loved ones in my life and people that are close to me. And I think we all have those stories about how we wish we could have done something differently, and that person would still be here if we could have helped invent that or help drive that technology forward. And that's very much what Atalys is about. People talk about a statistic. What's the one we're most proud of at Atalys? We touch 4 human lives every second. I'll leave you with that. That's what makes us Atalys, and that's what means something to us. We want to touch more lives, and we want to improve people's lives and make them better. I mean, for me, like I said, it begins, and for all of us at Atalys, it begins and ends with people.
Thank you very much for your time and insights today, John.
My pleasure.